the next team that we're going to move on and talk about is Top. I think because a lot of people are wondering, why is Top having so many issues? It is a big brain answer. You think these kids are changing their own light bulbs? You're crazy. I think the big thing with Top that everyone wants to know is, again, why are they struggling? What's going on with Top Esports? And I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that they got an upgrade in jungle, but it's still different. I still think Karsa is a really good jungler, despite the fact that he has not had the strongest performance to start. And then on top of that, they have a new bot lane. And if you noticed, coming back from break, they have, instead of starting Chocho with Fodic in the bot lane, they have started Yunja. And I mean, this is primarily because they were an LDL bot lane together, which I was kind of surprised that they weren't starting Yunja from the start. But I think that this bot lane still needs time. And we kind of saw that from 369 last year, who's their top laner. And that's one of the reasons why I thought that Top would kind of still be totally okay, because they've shown that they can integrate new rookie talent onto their team really easily. But I think with changing so many pieces, it's just going to take time. I think if you watched Top's game against Vici recently this week, I think you saw after game 1, the team look more like Top of old. And by that, I mean, I actually had a conversation on Twitter about this during the games. But when you think of Top, they actually had one of the highest oh my gosh, I'm blanking. They had one of the fastest game times last year. But that actually didn't necessarily mean that their early game was super fast. Typically, they would be incredibly explosive in the mid game, and whatever they'd be able to get, then they'd just be able to completely just steamroll their opponents from there. And that is what we saw in their final 2 games against Vici, I think, is the fact that you had this team that kind of still took time to ramp up in the early game, but then once they did hit mid game, they were incredibly explosive, and once they got those objectives, they just didn't stop that snowball. And so I mean, this is kind of like quote unquote outdated because LPL plays every night, right? So it's but I do think that the Top Vici matchup showed me that there is positive stuff on the horizon for Top Esports in general, just because it seems like they've been able to figure more stuff out. And the last team that I want to talk about really briefly, just because it seems like they have a ton of Western fans, is LNG, aka Snake, for everyone who probably knew of them when they came onto the scene in 2015. Snake were known for being strong starters and then falling off in the middle of Split. Have LNG already fallen off, or do you think they can pull off the reverse Snake and make it somewhere? ? So it's funny because whenever I think of LNG, I was like, oh yeah, they're sucking, they're doing really terribly. And then I look at their record, and they're currently in the standings in 5th place at 4-2, and they're 3 points behind FPX. So that's actually not a bad place to be. Last night we saw them go up against Rogue Warriors, and you saw some pretty cool mechanical plays from Flandra. If you didn't see people tweeting about his 2v1 in the top lane, you should go back and find that, because it's really hilarious. I also think that part of the reason why LNG won that game is because Rogue Warriors inexplicably left Aphelios up both games. But we'll leave draft discussion for another time, because I think a lot of people talk about draft a lot. I will say that the problem with LNG is never the talent. It's how they actually perform and their decision making. And their decision making historically, and the player who I think is responsible for both making really good risky decisions and making good really bad risky decisions, is one and the same. It's probably Flandra, just given the team's history through the years. So